Hey guys, today on the podcast, I'm talking with Michelle Segar about her new book, The Joy Choice. Michelle is a sustainable behavior change research and lifestyle coach. And in The Joy Choice, Michelle presents fun, flexible ways to create changes in eating and exercise that can finally stick. We often try to make ourselves live in a world of pass or fail, do or die, but we don't have to. Michelle's really passionate about how there is a middle way, and that middle way can be made in joy. I really think you're going to like this conversation. Michelle is full of passion, and you can feel the joy coming out of her as she speaks. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, and enjoy the show. Pull up a chair and buckle up. It's the Original Strength Podcast. So, Michelle, you have your newest book is The Joy Choice. What sparked you to want to write The Joy Choice?
Well, I would say a lot of things. First and foremost, I always like to learn new things. And as I was seeing new science come out about the role of executive functioning in lifestyle change, I thought, wow, this is new and different and really important. The other thing is that in my first book and the first couple of decades of my career, I was really focused on how to create high quality, sustainable motivation and set people up for success with the right belief system and strategies. But I think a piece that I hadn't really built out sufficiently was a framework and a concept and a tool to help people really know and be inspired about how to navigate the challenges that arise to our best laid plan. So really the joy choice fills that gap. It's not that I didn't deal with it at all, I did, but I think all or nothing thinking, which the joy choice is the antidote to, is so pervasive and so deeply physiologically embedded in our belief system and the physiology of our beliefs in our brain that we need something really hard-hitting and powerful to help us throw out those beliefs, to transcend them, to undo them and deconstruct them. And that's why I would say that's the biggest reason why I wrote The Joy Choice.
I think that was the message I got from the book too. Because maybe you can tell me why, but why do you think people tend to be pass fail or all or nothing on they try to set themselves up for some idea of extremes when life happens, somewhere in the middle of that?
Well, I think there's really a very specific, almost singular answer to that very big question. And that is, we've been socialized, indoctrinated, educated when it comes to eating and exercise. Society has taught us to have this myopic, all or nothing view. It's right or wrong, it's hit or miss. You hit the bullseye or nothing matters. And that is the nature of the problem, if you will. And the other perspective on this is, when we look at how we live all of the other areas of our lives with important long-term, lifelong projects, whether it's parenting or partnering or friending or being professionals, we don't bring the dogma of the bullseye, all or nothing thinking, to these other life areas, because we smartly know, like, this is how we have to live these other areas, that they're not perfect. Yet, because of the way healthy eating and exercise has evolved, the value has evolved in our society, it's come out of research. And by its very nature, and to no fault of its own, research is prescription focused. It's dose focused. We need to know, you can't do research and just say, oh, some of that leads to some of this. No, it's this amount is what, this very precise amount is what leads to this very precise outcome. And that's, you have to do research in that way. But what it showcases is that the manner in which we do research by necessity doesn't translate into how, once we leave the lab, the world of research, we can enact it in real life. So in real life, most of us can't do our exercise and healthy eating in the right way precisely all the time. And there's some of the population, and I'm married to one of them, that pretty much follows the path without deviation. But guess what? He does all aspects of his life that way. That's who he is as a person. And I think that's the challenge, is that even the field of fitness, our teachers in fitness tend to be people who love fitness and see it in this way. And often there's a no deviation in their perspective in the way they do things, and because that is also who they are at their core. But when it comes to those of us who aren't in the fitness field or who aren't nutritionists, and our lives might be messy because we're juggling kids and aging parents and our own careers and the needs of our pets, our lives can't accommodate this perfectionistic all or nothing approach to healthy eating and exercise for many of us.
So you mentioned your husband, and I think you called him a habitor. Is that the word?
A habiter. Yes.
A habiter. So, well, I'm a habiter. Like when you talk about your husband, I was like, well, yeah, okay, I get that. And then you're like, and this book is not for habiters. But I read it anyway. So, so not everybody is a habiter, and which was actually, it was neat for me to hear how you explain things like that, because my whole life people are like, well, how can you do that? And think, whatever it is. And I'm like, well, I just do it.
Right.
Like I just get up, like, well, what if this happens? Well, I get up earlier. Like, it's because like, I'm assuming with your husband, it's all about the routine.
Yes. You're totally, it is. And some people can do that routine. The problem is that for whatever reason, the routine, and I'm going to call the routine the bullseye, on a target. In the real world, when you're playing darts, the bullseye might be like the most points, but when you hit other areas of the target, you still get points. Mm-hmm. But for some reason, well, for the reasons I've already talked about, and maybe more too, there's been a philosophy and belief system that's been diffused to us in the public that teaches that if you do not hit the bullseye, you do not get any points. And that's the problem, because really the target should be the whole room, because something is better than nothing, not just the tiny red spot that you have to be an expert. What is it called?
Archer.
Archer, the expert archer to hit.
Yeah, no. And I thought that was good, because like, it is hard to understand sometimes why other, like, regular people, apparently habitors are the minority.
Yes, I think so. I think so.
So, and your stance is that, hey, regular people actually deal with life. Life happens. And it's being able to pivot and make those choices when life happens that you get those points on the dartboard, when you can successfully make those choices.
It's because to stay lasting change, this holy grail, sustainable change, and that's what I've been studying for almost 30 years, both through academic research as well as being a health coach. Sustainable change is the outcome of consistency. And when I say consistency, I don't mean the same thing every time. I don't mean the expert archery hitting the bullseye, but when I say consistency, I just mean now something is better than nothing. And of course, as you know, the joy choice is the perfect and perfect option that lets us do something instead of nothing. Because if we do nothing, then we get off the path of consistency. So that's why doing something is better than nothing. And it's, as I've been talking about this concept since the book came out in April. And, I get pushback, and I always love pushback. And, one of the common pushbacks I get is, Michelle, do we really need to teach adults that something is better than nothing? I mean, don't we know this already? Come on. And of course, on the one hand, I could say, yeah, you're right. Like, why should we need to teach adults something that's common sense? But there's a couple of really important reasons why. One is that we have internalized a belief system that is the opposite, that is all or nothing. So it's not enough to say something is better than nothing, and we certainly can't assume people will believe it, because people have been taught to believe all or nothing. So we have to understand, and you can't just flip a switch necessarily and change that kind of ingrained belief about success. Number one. Number two, it's so mundane and droll, like something is better than nothing. Like, oh yeah, I can do the imperfect choice. We need to go beyond teaching people that something is better than nothing and inspire them to want to make that perfectly imperfect choice, because we all have so much on our plates, and a lot of it is very meaningful. It's our families, it's our work, it's our places of worship. So in order to take time or the effort, whether it's eating or exercise, we have to feel like it's meaningful enough to grab our attention and spend our time and make the effort. And so we need to understand that when we pick the joy choice and make the perfect and perfect option to keep us consistent, it's not just about staying on the path of lasting change. It's about fueling ourselves. There's some theories of joy say that joy is the feeling of a match between the moment and our core sense of self. Let me say that again. There's an alignment between the moment right now, like right now, this moment with you is absolutely aligning with my core sense of self, because I'm talking about this work that I find very meaningful. So I am experiencing joy. So when we can teach people that an in the moment decision they might make about their healthy eating and exercise, that it doesn't just support their greater exercise and eating goals, but it actually helps them realize who they are. Like this conversation with you is helping me realize who I am. Then that makes the choice to do something instead of nothing so much more meaningful than just, oh, I want to make this last. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it does. And I think for a lot of people, yeah, they know something's better than nothing, but they only especially know it when it's not them. So if I'm detached from your story, I can better clearly see your story and what I think something would be better than nothing for you to do. But when it's me and it's personal, then all of a sudden the tree is right in front of my face and I can't see the forest anymore. So then it's easier to become all or nothing, I think, sometimes.
Absolutely. It's easier to tell a friend, oh, a 3-minute walk is worth doing than telling yourself that. So you're absolutely right. But again, the reason why that is true. I mean, there is this distance issue also, but the other issue is that we have been socialized and educated that success is not the perfect and perfect. The success is precision. It's what the habiters do. And so we have to redefine success. And that is asking a lot of our brains, which is why we need to talk about it and why we need, people like you, influencers like you talking about it, because the more we talk about it, the more we relearn and rethink what success is. And honestly, whether we have been successful with that other version of success that the habiters are successful with, again, the minority of the population, or whether we can give ourselves grace and adopt a new version of success that not only does give us ourselves grace in theory, but is actually what the research suggests most people use to make adaptive choices in eating and exercise.
And I like how you presented what joy was, the match between the moment and your core sense of self. Because like the name of the book is The Joy Choice. And so the question is really, well, okay, well, how can you have joy in a choice?
Yes,
Especially when you're trying to navigate your way through the day's events or what you want to do, what you think you should be doing, and like what you can't do.
that's right. And I need to, there's a theorist out of, I think, Clark University who came up with that precise definition, and it's just felt like a really good fit for explaining one way to explain why we need to talk about it in this way.
Now, in the book, you use examples of weight loss, nutrition, exercise, things for a person to get healthy. But this is not just about the joy choice, isn't just relegated to only somebody trying to get into good habits of health, right? Like it's this, you could put this anywhere.
You can put it anywhere. You can put it anywhere. My work is on sustainable lifestyle change. So that's why the book is about that. But the nature of the solution, the perfect and perfect solution, or even the POP decision tool, the 3-step decision tool, is sufficiently flexible that we can use everything in any context that makes sense for us. I use it with stress. When I feel stressed out about something, I pop it. I go through the steps that I teach people to go through when they face a challenge or a choice point with their eating and exercise, because the decision tool, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead too much, but the POP decision tool I designed to support the science of our working memory, of our cognitive flexibility and our inhibition, our executive functions that relate to these core, healthy eating and exercise. And those tactics, pausing, like, I'm like the millionth person to say you should pause, but you have to pause. So there's this universal truism that underlies that step one of POP, pause, because if you don't pause, you're in pure reactive state and you don't have the time to harness your thinking, to take a breath and regroup so that you can then start to think flexibly by opening up your options. Again, opening up your options and playing when you're at a point of decision, there's nothing smarter than that, right? So that's why it can be used for anything.
No, I love it. And like pausing is important because it gives you that space to pivot, to take it in and pivot.
Yes.
Those throughout the book, you did a great. I thought this was good because I know everybody's been there. You're at a party. You're on this healthy kick, whatever that kick is for you. Maybe it's like you're going to buckle down on your nutrition or whatever, but you end up going to a party or a social event and people are eating something that you have said that you're not going to eat, or it's just not healthy for you or whatever. It's just it was off your diet plan. You did a great job at showing how that can, one, wreck a person, and two, where it doesn't have to wreck a person, because those were moments where people, you can really have such a huge tug of war in your mind, and you can like start sweating, you can just get angry, you can be the most uncomfortable person at the party. You can be the person nobody wants to talk to anymore all of a sudden because now you're angry, but nobody is quite sure why. Or you just give all in and then you become like you're off the wagon, whatever that means to you, and you failed. But your road is, there's a middle way.
That's right. And it's called in the academic literature, it's very jargony. It's called flexible restraint. It means you use restraint, but with flexibility. Because if you try to be there's an Aesop's fable that addresses this, but I think I won't go there. If you always try to hit the bullseye, at some point you lose your resolve, you feel resentful, you feel like you're missing out. Like, it's about what we're talking about is our eating and exercise. It goes back to how we started the conversation. Our eating and exercise has to ebb and flow for to be consistent, just like our parenting ebbs and flows, and just like all these other areas of our lives. We have to start thinking about healthy eating and exercise more like we think about these other things that we do, instead of outside of the hecticness and the need to stop and start and shift and pivot like we do with the other areas of our lives. But we haven't been taught to think about exercise and eating in that way. We've been told to buy books that tell us this is the solution. It doesn't. It's a recipe. This is a recipe for doing something. The problem is, if the recipe isn't designed to work with the shifts and pivoting that we have to do in our real life context, then it isn't going to stay. It cannot stay standing. And so that's why it has to be flexible. Again, there are some people like you and my husband and many other people I know who don't need to have the same extent of shifting, because you have your regimen. My husband gets up at 5:30 every morning to get his exercise in before anything's going to derail it. And the reason why he does that, to the detriment often of his sleep, is because for him, exercise is his premier quality life vitamin every day. And again, he lives his whole life like that. So who do you know who is like that? And are the majority of people like that? And the answer is probably no, because I think it's a personality characteristic, and I don't think it's the characteristic that the majority of the population have. Otherwise, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That
Right.
The last 30 to 40 years of health promotion and exercise promotion and healthy eating promotion would have worked, because the recipes we've been given for them tell us to do it precisely right, but they haven't worked for most people.
So the joy choice is kind of like a guide to being flexible, so that you can achieve your goals in life with a smile on your face for the most part.
And it's not just, it's to promote being playful and flexible, but again, not just to support your greater eating and exercise goals, but to help you actualize who you are. When you take care of yourself, whether it's getting enough sleep, my book is not about sleep, I'm just broadly talking about self-care. People change their eating patterns and they want to start exercising as some type of form of self-care. And when we take care of ourselves, and whether we do or not, we know this truism, when we take care of ourselves, we have so much more energy and enthusiasm and health and well-being that we funnel into the most meaningful areas of our lives. That is actualizing ourselves through, maybe you're at the party and there's this cookie and you're dying for that chocolate chip cookie, or maybe there's like 10 cookies that you want, and I can't have it. But if you, oftentimes in those situations, we don't have the requisite energy to stop ourselves. We rebel. Darn it, I hate this diet. I'm so pissed at my doctor for telling me I had to do this. And we rebel against it. It's got to be perfect. But when we get past those decision traps, because we come at it flexibly, because maybe the joy choice is eating half the cookie, letting yourself partake in the celebration and the deliciousness, but not going overboard. When it's not all or nothing, I can't, or I'm gonna have everything, then there's no need to be so reactive, and you can give yourself permission to be flexible and use this strategy, the joy choice, and have something. And but it doesn't have to throw you in a tizzy, because you're being flexible and you're living your cookie decision like you have to live your parenting life and everything else.
So would you connect the dots to, like, if you could be flexible in your choices, and say you were allowing yourself to be flexible and have the chocolate chip cookie, then maybe you could eat that cookie with joy so that you could digest it and rest in like your parasympathetic state, versus if you are rigid, or you say you just get all stressed out about it, and then you throw yourself into a sympathetic state, and then you eat the cookie, or you don't. Either way, now you're in fight or flight. Like, it looks like one makes it much more harder to get, to sleep and to digest and to recover, versus the other.
You know what? I love where you're going with this idea. I don't think there's been research on this. I think there should be research on it. If you exercise and it's like, oh, I hate it, does that somehow dilute the positive mental health benefits? Maybe.
I think it does.
We don't know, but you know what? We don't know the answer to that question, but boy, do we need to research that, because
I think we're talking about like the way you're talking about exercise right now, that would be the difference between practicing something or punishment.
Yes.
And punishment is going to have negative consequences.
Well, we know motivationally for sure. We know from research that motivationally and behaviorally, there are very real consequences of exercising in punishing ways. But, and to be completely honest, it's not different from sex. I mean, if people don't like what they're doing during sex, they're not going to want to do that. And it's because we embody, like, exercise and sex are both embodied experiences. But the question you're asking, which I don't think the research has started to go here, and I've often wondered this, but I haven't researched it, and it has to do with physiological and very specific outcomes. But the question is, and for those of your listeners who are researchers and in this field, like, study this. Like, will someone potentially get less either physiological benefits or mental health benefits if their choice feels punishing or like a should or a chore? I think that's a really interesting question. Again, we know behaviorally there are impacts, but would it actually reduce the physiological impact? And I don't know.
So as a kid, I was a picky eater, and sometimes I would get forced to eat certain things. And I can only, like, if I'm remembering all of that, I can't imagine being in the high state of fight or flight that I was in when I was forced to eat those things, that I was getting any nutrition out of anything that I ate whatsoever.
Wow. I don't know. I mean, I think you would probably get nutrition out of it. The question is, I'm thinking more in terms of exercise. Like, or maybe it's not even that you wouldn't get as much. It's whether it's the recognition that that experience, that state of mind, that belief system would be a stressor on the system. And so, we know stress, when we're stressed, that is just bad for our whole body system, right? So that's just something that has to be acknowledged, that whether or not that stress actually is detrimental on the benefits of exercise or on the benefits per se of eating, we know that stress is bad. So we know we are in some way, shape, or form feeling that stress and resentment isn't some type of negative experience to our system.
And I should just say, Mom, if you're listening, I know you were doing the best you could. I still don't like broccoli though. Anyway, if a person, though, to me, if a person can make a choice out of joy, like true joy, then they are approaching a situation in a more peaceful, calm state of mind, and everything's just going to be better with that choice. So I think you're right. I love the concept of the joy choice, like making a choice out of joy, or with the intent
for joy, to joy, for success. Yeah, I mean, that is why I called it. It couldn't have been more purposeful. There's a whole nother body of research about framing and how the frames we use for any behavior, whether it's a work-related behavior or exercise behavior, it influences not only how we experience doing that behavior, whether it's drinking salty water that's got a delicious, like, gourmet name versus boiled vegetable water. We know that people experience tasting that and drinking it, and just like people experience physical activity differently if they're told it's fun or versus exercise. We know that those frames make a difference on experience, but because we also know that what we expect to experience on future choices, we know that how we feel, the feelings we expect to experience from a choice, that negative or positive experience that we had from one of the frames is also going to impact our future choices about whether we're going to want to do it or not. So how we frame our choices has huge implications for whether or not we'll be able to stay consistent, whether we'll feel the desire, the necessary desire, and have the skill set, again, the flexibility that research suggests is going to be more adaptive for most people to stick with it. So that's why it's the joy choice, because it matters what we call it.
So Michelle, if people want to learn more about how to make that joyful choice, yes, they definitely need to read your book, but you also have other resources available to people too. How can people learn more about themselves to make that joy choice and learn more from you?
Well, thank you. Well, I do have a quiz. We didn't talk a lot about it. We talked about it a little bit, and I don't know that we need to go into the details, but I talk about the 4 most common decision traps that I've come up against in my coaching, and that's temptation, rebellion, accommodation, and perfection. And there's a quiz on my website that people can take, and they get a personalized report. And the value of having a report on the types of your biggest decision traps is because we already talked about the need to pause if we're going to have an adaptive pivot, right, when we face a challenging moment. And so if we're able to name what that is, oh, I'm a rebel, like that there's rebellion staring me down. The more precise we can name what's getting in our way, the more, to quote Dan Siegel, the neuroscientist, the more we can tame it, name it to tame it. So the quiz on my website will give people an opportunity to be better at naming and taming these forces that tend to derail us at these points of choice. So my website is my name, which is michellesegar.com.
I will put that in the notes of the show as well, michellesegar.com. And you can take the test, and they can buy the book at Amazon and your website.
And my website links to local bookstores and Amazon and other big sellers online too. So I have a book page called The Joy Choice that's under books, and you go to The Joy Choice under books, and then the quiz is there, as well as opportunities to link directly to buy the book.
I will put that in the notes of the show as well. Ladies and gentlemen, do yourself, even if you're a habiter, you may really learn some good information from the joy choice, especially if you're in the exercise, health and fitness world.
Yes.
I thought the sections that you covered in there about the fitness industry were amazing. So great job there. Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Now get outside and play.